The moment I should have known something was wrong was when my son was 3 days old. I was sitting in the rocking chair my father had left me. Old oak creaks on the left side every time. And I was holding this tiny person in my arms for maybe the fourth time that day because I couldn't put him down. I kept searching his face the way new fathers do, looking for yourself in someone else. And I found something, but it wasn't me. I told myself I was being crazy. Sleep deprivation does things to you. My wife had just gone through 14 hours of labor and I had been awake for most of them. And when you're running on hospital vending machine coffee and terror, your brain manufactures problems that don't exist. I set the thought aside. I rocked my son. I told myself I was the luckiest man alive. I almost believed it. My name is not important. What matters is that I was 41 years old, married for 6 years, and I had wanted to be a father for as long as I could remember. Not in the vague, someday way that people say when they mean not right now. I mean, I had thought about it seriously, specifically. I had imagined coaching Little League. I had thought about what I would say at a high school graduation. I had picked out a name, not publicly, just in my head, a name I had kept for years, like something private and a little embarrassing. My wife. I'll call her my wife, because even now that feels like the most accurate thing I can say about who she was to me. She came into my life 3 years after my first serious relationship ended badly, and I had decided more or less that I was not someone things worked out for. She was sharp and funny, and she had this way of looking at you like she was always 2 steps ahead of whatever you were saying. I fell fast. I fell hard. By the end of the first year, I knew she was it. We got married on a Saturday in October, outside, in the kind of weather that makes you feel like the universe is cooperating for once. Her parents were there. My mother was there. My younger brother stood next to me and kept making me laugh at the wrong moments. It was perfect in the way that a few days in your life are actually genuinely perfect, where nothing goes wrong and you remember it in full color afterward. Then we started trying to have a baby, and that is where the story gets harder to tell. It took longer than we expected. A year passed, then another. We went to a specialist, did all the testing, and the results came back with a word I had heard before but never thought would apply to me. The doctor said my numbers were low, not absent, but low enough that our chances without intervention were significantly reduced. He used phrases like challenging and not impossible in the same breath, which is a very specific kind of torture. My wife took the news quietly. Too quietly, I thought at the time, but I told myself she was processing. She held my hand in the parking lot and said it would be okay. I believed her. I had no reason not to. A few months later, she brought up donor sperm for the first time. I said no. I want to be honest about that. I said no clearly, and I said it more than once. It wasn't that I had any particular philosophical objection. I understood the argument. I understood that plenty of families were built that way, and they were real families. But I wasn't ready. It felt too soon. We hadn't exhausted every option, and something in me, something I couldn't quite name at the time, resisted the idea in a way that went beyond logic. She seemed to accept it. We moved on. We talked about other options. IVF with my sample, even though the odds were lower. Even adoption, which we agreed we would revisit. Life continued. She stopped bringing it up. I took that to mean she had come around to waiting, that we were on the same page. We were not on the same page. My son was born on a Tuesday in February, which is an unremarkable day for most people, but which I will never forget as long as I live. The labor was long and hard, and when it was finally over and they put him in my arms, I cried in a way I hadn't cried since my father died. Real, ugly crying. The kind you can't control and don't try to. He was small and red-faced and furious at being in the world, and I thought he was the most extraordinary thing I had ever seen. The thought came later. After the first night, after the fog started to lift just slightly. It was the shape of his eyes, the way his ears sat on his head. I had photographs of myself as a newborn. My mother had given me a whole album years ago, and I found myself, quietly, when my wife was sleeping, comparing them on my phone. I told myself I was being paranoid. I put the phone away. I did not mention it to anyone. The months that followed were the particular exhaustion of new parenthood, which flattens everything else. You stop having thoughts that aren't about feeding schedules and sleep windows. Doubt gets buried under logistics. I loved my son. I want to make that clear because it matters. Whatever questions were living in the back of my mind, I loved that boy completely, and holding him at 2 in the morning while he screamed was one of the most important things I had ever done. But the questions didn't disappear. They just waited. By the time he was 8 months old, people had started saying things, not maliciously, just the offhand things people say about babies. A neighbor came by when I was out front with a stroller and said, "Oh, he must take after your wife's side entirely." My mother, once, in passing, said something about his coloring and then moved on quickly like she regretted bringing it up. My brother took a photo of me holding my son and looked at it for a long moment before saying something vague about genetics being unpredictable. I started doing research I was ashamed of doing. Late at night, in the bathroom with the door locked, I looked up things like, can a child look nothing like one parent? And genetic inheritance eye color, and how early can you do a paternity test? I read forum posts from other men who had asked the same questions. Some of them had gotten answers. Some of those answers had destroyed their lives. I put the phone away again. I went back to bed. I lay in the dark next to my wife and listened to the baby monitor and told myself I was a coward inventing problems because I was afraid of being happy. This went on for months. What finally broke it open wasn't a phone or a test or a confrontation. It was a box. We had been in our house for 4 years by that point, and there were still boxes in the basement storage room that had never been fully unpacked, boxes from my wife's apartment before we merged our lives. I had gone down there on a Sunday afternoon to find our old camping gear because my brother had asked to borrow it, and the camping gear was in the far corner behind a stack of our old moving boxes that I had never touched. I moved the boxes. One of them had been taped shut, but the tape had dried and come loose over the years, and when I shifted it, the top folded open. I wasn't looking for anything. That matters to me. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even curious. I was looking for a tent and a camp stove. The box had papers in it. Old mail, by the look of it. A folder from what looked like a medical office, and a manila envelope with a logo I didn't recognize at first. A small medical services company, the kind of logo designed to look friendly and discreet. I stood there in the basement for a very long time. The folder was from a fertility clinic I had never heard of, in a city 2 hours from where we lived. My wife's name was on it. The date was from 3 years before our son was born. About 4 months after I had told her, clearly and directly, that I did not want to use donor sperm. The manila envelope contained intake paperwork for a sperm bank, a profile selection form, and a receipt. The receipt had a date. The date was from 2 years and 9 months before my son was born. I sat down on the concrete floor of my basement, and I didn't move for a long time. There was a name on the profile form. Not a personal name, just a donor code, but there was a physical description. Height, hair color, eye color, and a short personal essay that the donor had written. One of those things where they described their interests and their personality. A paragraph that was clearly designed to help people feel a connection to someone they would never meet. I read that paragraph 4 times. Then I folded everything back up the way I had found it and put it back in the box and went upstairs. I did not say anything that day, or the next day, or for 2 weeks. I don't fully understand why. Part of it was that I needed to be sure, not of the facts, which were by now fairly clear to me, but of myself. I needed to know what I was going to do before I opened the store, because I knew that once I opened it, I would not be able to close it again. I ordered a home paternity test. I used my son's toothbrush and a cheek swab I did myself. I sent it to a lab that mailed results in a plain envelope with no return address. I waited 11 days. The results were not a surprise, but reading them was still the worst moment of my life up to that point. I called my brother first. He's the only person I trust completely, and I needed to hear a voice I knew before I did anything else. He didn't say much. He listened. At the end, he said, "Tell me what you need." What I needed was a lawyer, as it turned out. I spent the next 3 weeks doing things quietly. I met with an attorney who specialized in family law and explained my situation. I made copies of everything from the basement box. I organized the paternity results. I got my financial picture in order. I stopped making any major shared purchases. I was methodical in a way that surprised me, because on the inside I felt like I was falling from a great height and hadn't hit the ground yet. My wife did not notice anything was different. Or as she did, she said nothing. The day I told her, we had just put our son to bed. She was in the kitchen, and I came in and sat down at the table. And something in my face must have changed because she went still before I said a single word. I didn't yell. I had thought I would. I had rehearsed a version of this conversation in my head where I said everything I had wanted to say for weeks, loud and thorough and without stopping. But when I sat across from her and looked at her face, I didn't have the energy for it. I put the copy of the paternity results on the table. I put the folder from the fertility clinic next to it. I put the receipt on top. She looked at the papers for a long time. Then she said, "I was going to tell you eventually." I remember the silence after that more than anything else she said that night. I remember the refrigerator hum and the baby monitor on the counter and the way the kitchen light made everything look slightly too yellow. I remember thinking eventually, as if this was something with a natural expiration date, as if there was a future version of this conversation that would have been easier. She told me she had always planned to use donor sperm, not as a backup plan, as the plan. She said she had convinced herself she was doing it for us, that she knew we both wanted a child and that she was removing an obstacle. She said she had told herself that once the baby was born and I loved him, which I would, she was sure of it. She knew me. It wouldn't matter anymore. The biology would stop being relevant. I asked her why she hadn't at least tried with my sample first. We had discussed that. It had been on the table. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said the odds had seemed too low and she hadn't wanted to get my hopes up. I have thought about that answer many times since. Whether I believe it. Whether it matters if I believe it. I asked her how long she had been planning this before she started doing it. She didn't answer directly. The next morning I called her parents. I had always had a functional relationship with my in-laws. Not warm, exactly, but civil and without friction. Her father had never been particularly interested in me. Her mother had always been polite in the way that some people are polite when they are waiting for you to stop talking. Her mother answered. I explained what I had found. I explained what my wife had told me. I explained that I had already spoken with a lawyer and that I intended to file for divorce. What happened next, I did not expect, though looking back, I should have. Her mother did not express shock or sympathy or even the mild discomfort of someone who has just learned their child did something wrong. She went very calm and very formal and said, in a voice I can only describe as prepared, that she hoped I would reconsider. That our son needed stability, that these things were complicated. And then she said something I will remember for the rest of my life. She said she had always had concerns about my genetic picture. That there was a history of medical issues on my side of the family. She mentioned my father, who had died of a heart condition at 62, and that, if she was being honest, she had encouraged her daughter to think carefully about what was best for the child. I asked her to repeat that. She did not repeat it, but she also did not take it back. I stayed on the phone for maybe 40 more seconds. Then I hung up and sat in my car in my own driveway for a while. My wife's father called me that evening. He was more diplomatic. He talked about the child's well-being and used words like practical and mature. He said he hoped I could see the bigger picture. He suggested that what was done, and that the real question was how we all moved forward together. I told him I appreciated his perspective and ended the call. My brother came over that night and we sat on the back porch, and he didn't say much, and neither did I. At some point he said, "For the record, I think you're handling this better than I would." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. The divorce proceedings took 8 months. My wife contested initially, not the facts, which were documented, but the terms. Her lawyer made arguments about the nature of my attachment to our son, about the amount of time I had functioned as his father, about the complexity of the situation. My lawyer made different arguments. The paternity results were unambiguous. The clinic paperwork was unambiguous. The receipt was dated. During those 8 months, I lived in an extended stay hotel 2 miles from the house. I saw my son twice a week during the interim custody arrangement. Those visits were the hardest and the most important thing in my life simultaneously. I would pick him up, and he would reach for my face with both hands the way very small children do, and I would feel something I don't have a word for. Love that was entirely real and grief that was entirely real, and the two of them sitting side by side in my chest without resolving into anything. Simpler. I want to say something about my son here, because this story is about his mother's choices and about what happened to my marriage, but he is not responsible for any of it. He was not quite 2 years old when his parents' marriage ended. He does not know what a paternity test is. He knows that he has a father who shows up and reads him the same 3 books every single visit because those are the ones he picks, and I would read them 1,000 times if he keeps picking them. What the court decided, in the end, was informed by several things: the documented deception, the length of time it had been maintained, my established relationship with the child, and the question of what legal parenthood in this case actually meant and to whom. My attorney argued effectively. The outcome was not what my wife's family expected. I am not going to describe the exact legal terms here because some of it is still in the process of being finalized and some of it involves my son's future in ways I'm not willing to put into a public accounting. What I will say is that the phrase paternity fraud appears in the official documentation, and that phrase carries real legal weight in the state where we live. Her parents did not look prepared for that weight. In the weeks after the final hearing, my wife called me several times. I answered twice. The first time she said she was sorry, and she sounded like she meant it, and I told her I believed her and that it didn't change anything. The second time she asked if she could talk to me about our son's schedule, and I said yes, that was fine, and we talked about that instead, and the conversation was civil and exhausting, and exactly what the rest of our communication will probably look like for the next 16 years. I moved into an apartment in the same school district. I have an actual rocking chair now. Not my father's one, which is still in a storage unit, but a new one I bought at an estate sale for $40. It creaks on the right side. My brother came to help me set up the apartment. We put together a small bed for my son's room, even though my son is still too young to sleep in it. It's more like a declaration of intent, a symbol that this space is for him too. My brother and I ate pizza on the floor because I didn't have a table yet, and he made the same joke 3 times about my taste in apartments, and I laughed all 3 times. There are people who hear this story and want me to express regret about the time I lost, or anger about the deception, or something conclusive about what it all meant. I understand the impulse. Stories are supposed to arrive somewhere. You want the narrator to hold up a lesson like a trophy and say, "Here, this is what you take away." What I actually have is less tidy than that. I have a son who is almost 2 and who calls for me when he wakes up from naps. I have a divorce that is nearly finalized, and a lawyer I have paid a significant amount of money in a set of custody arrangements that are not perfect but are workable. I have an apartment that still smells slightly like the previous tenant's candles and a rocking chair that creaks in the wrong place, and a brother who answers the phone on the first ring every single time. I have the knowledge that the thing I was most afraid of, losing the ability to be this child's father, did not happen. That it was the thing I fought hardest to protect, and that fighting for it was the right call, and that I knew that even on the days when I wasn't sure of anything else, I also have this. A few weeks ago, I was giving my son a bath, which is one of those ordinary tasks of parenthood that becomes somehow profound when you're in the middle of a year like this one. He was playing with a plastic boat, extremely focused, the way toddlers get when they've decided something is the most important project in the world. And he looked up at me for a second. Just for a second, with this expression that I don't have a name for. Completely unbothered, completely present. I thought, whatever happened to bring us here, we're here. And we're okay. That's not a conclusion, but it's true, and right now, true is enough. I've thought a lot about the sequence of things, not just what happened, but the order it happened in, because the order matters more than people give it credit for. My wife made her first choice when she decided, alone, that my answer didn't count. That was the original action, everything that followed, the box in the basement, the receipt with the date on it, the 11 days waiting for lab results I already knew in my gut. All of it was downstream of that one decision she made quietly, years before I had any idea. That's not a religious idea, and it's not complicated. It's just physics almost. You put something in motion, and it keeps moving. She put something in motion and it moved for years. Right up until the morning I sat on a concrete floor and held a piece of paper that confirmed what my body had been trying to tell me since the delivery room. What I keep coming back to is the difference between intelligence and honesty. My wife was smart. She planned carefully. She accounted for a lot of variables. But she built the whole thing on the assumption that I would never look too hard, that love would eventually smooth over the questions, that a man who wanted to be a father badly enough would stop asking inconvenient things. She was smart about the logistics and dishonest about the foundation. And the foundation is the only part that actually holds weight. I think about my son in all of this. He didn't choose any of it. He is not a consequence or a symbol or evidence of anything. He's a kid who likes plastic boats and has strong opinions about which 3 books get read before bed. Whatever his mother did, he is separate from it in my mind, and keeping that separation clear has been one of the things I've worked hardest at this past year. The people who hurt you and the people who love you are not always different people. That's one of the harder things to hold. My brother answered the phone on the first ring every time I called him during those 8 months. I don't know if he knows how much that meant. Probably I'll tell him at some point. The people who simply show up, without speeches, without conditions, without needing to understand everything first. Those are the ones who actually carry you through things. I had spent years being grateful in a general way for his presence in my life. Now, I am grateful in a specific, detailed, documented way. There's a difference. The last thing I want to say is about endurance, because I think endurance gets misunderstood. People use the word like it means toughness. Gritting your teeth and absorbing damage without showing it. That's not what I did. I cried in parking lots. I ate bad takeout alone in a hotel room on my son's first Christmas. I called my brother at 11 at night more times than I can count. Endurance isn't about not feeling things. It's about continuing to act like yourself. Continuing to show up for the people who need you, even while you're feeling all of it. The rocking chair in my new apartment creaks on the right side. My son has learned to anticipate the creak, and he laughs every time. I have $40 and an estate sale to thank for that. It's not the chair my father left me, but it's the right chair for right now, and right now is where we actually live.